Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, here we go, where I get another chance to speak with another accessibility practitioner. And today I'm pleased to be speaking with Jen Smith. Hello, Jen, how are you?
I'm doing great, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in my home office on Vashon Island, which is near Blink's headquarters office in Seattle. Where are you talking to us from?
I am also in Seattle near you, Joe. And I used to formerly live on Vashon, so I'm not too far away from where you currently are.
Well, it is good to see you again. And yeah, I have known you from some past activities. So it's good to have this chance to talk about your professional work since the last time we met up. But, a good place to start would be if you could just tell us a little bit about what you're currently involved with.
Yeah, I currently work at Visa. I'm a director there, and my title is Director of Strategic Initiatives in Accessibility. We're housed in the design part of the organization, which I truly love. And day to day, what that means is I get to operationalize accessibility for our products when they're working with clients, a lot of our banking clients, and our banking clients who take accessibility very seriously and want these products to be accessible yesterday, and our products are maybe kind of like had their own roadmap, but maybe the roadmap was a little bit longer than our clients might have liked to have heard about. And maybe they were transitioning from WCAG 2.0 to 2.1 and had a little bit, some bumps in the road. And so my team and I of accessibility practitioners get in there and help them understand where to focus their efforts and energy operationally. We work with developers, designers, leaders, PMs, you name it. We've got the expertise across the board to help them understand where to focus their energy and efforts to make the most momentum the most quickly to get from point A to point B across the finish line. So it's a really, really fun job to think through organizational change and accessibility, and not always just the compliance end of the spectrum, but really think through what's the best for our B2B business customers, but also what's impacting then their customers, their B2C customers on the other side.
Well, you're in one of those companies where I think just about everyone is familiar with it, most probably as something that we've actively worked with on a consumer basis. But maybe you could talk a little bit more, beyond what I might know as somebody using a credit card, and like what are the accessibility touch points that you get into, throughout your organization?
It really, I think you can run the gamut, because I think if people think of Visa, our brand is pretty ubiquitous, and they think of us on their credit card, but they don't realize how many applications that we truly build for our clients across the board, as far as payments and tokenizations, and different things that enable payments to happen behind the scenes. And not only physical cards, but just anything that makes digital payments happen. And how much we think through not only like the payment space in general, cards, but just happen across end-to-end merchants. If you're running a business, if you're making a payment, anything in that space, Visa can be involved in. And how much when we're talking, we want to make payments happen where the best way to be paid for everyone everywhere. And so we have that everyone in there, and we truly mean it. So it's one of those things that it's really fun to be involved in that and think through all of those different facets. And being in the design end of the company, where we get to talk about that user experience part of the process, and not just the compliance and the legal end of the spectrum. And always, like, risk is definitely a part of it, but not always just be the stick end of the accessibility risk spectrum, but also the user experience and of the conversation that we often get roped into when we're talking about accessibility.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting to get some of the background and the depth that many of us probably aren't aware of. Well, one of the things that I like to do in this program is find out how people found their way into working on this kind of thing. So, what was it for you where accessibility was something you first learned about, and then I know you've been working on it for a while now. How did you get into it professionally?
Yeah, the first job I had where it was a formal part of my job, I worked for an agency in the state of Oklahoma, and we were in the education industry. It was a guarantor for higher education, and we took care of student loans. And so we had to be Section 508 compliant. I had zero tools, zero budget, zero people to train me. And I had a foundation in HTML. I had a journalism degree. I was the designer, and I was using Dreamweaver. So this is back in the 2000s. And I just had like a checklist from the federal government and a heart full of good intentions. And I was following the checklist, and working my way through it and reading blogs and information full of, I think, all of these industry names that we all know so well, whether it's Haydon Pickering or Carl Groves or, oh my gosh, of course, now that I'm Lainey Feingold. Whether it's technical expertise, design expertise, developer expertise, like all of these people who are willing to share what they had been through, what they tried, what worked and what didn't work, and just publicly share it online. You would just go and you would just soak it up as a sponge and like, okay, let me try this. Let me see what works, what doesn't work. And you would just try it out and hope for the best, and then try again and iterate. And it was that progress over perfection, like my friend Meryl Evans likes to say, and just see and learn and grow and learn and grow. And thankfully, back then, things weren't quite as complicated as they are now with all of the frameworks that we have. And you would just try and experiment. And also before then, I had seen the power of digital technology in the lives of people with disabilities, and knew that it could be something that created equality and access for people, and agency for people with disabilities, when they were often shut out from conversations. And for me, that was important in a job, and why I wanted to have that be not a facet of a job, but once I got hooked into doing it as part of my job, why I wanted it to be a sole feature of my job in my career moving forward. I had a neighbor who was blind when I was in college. I had when I first graduated with my journalism degree, I worked for an NPR affiliate radio station in Oklahoma, and we had a volunteer who had an injury, and he had a disability, a lifelong disability. And I'd seen with his injury, again, how access and how disability had changed his life, and how he was treated, whether he had agency to do things on his own, and how people treated him in the real world without that agency, and what a difference that made. And I wanted to be part of the change and part of giving people more of that agency. So once I got that taste at that state agency, I'm like, this is for me what makes my job of working on these ones and zeros and building these websites different than, designing another brochure and publishing this Dreamweaver page over and over and over. And I feel like having the HTML background, the journalism background, and being able to translate from technical to design, and to people who didn't understand the technical, there's those parallels that you have about like, why does information and relationships matter from the back end to the front end? I could explain that to people, and they could kind of understand why it mattered and why we needed to do that. And it was infectious to me. So that's where I got started. And then I always wanted it to be part of my job moving forward. And I was more or less able to kind of make that happen from the 2000s to now.
And you've definitely moved along and worked for several organizations, specifically in the accessibility area. Were there any differences or unique challenges as you moved along? Was it like stepping stones or building blocks to where you are, or were they just different types of experiences?
Yeah, they all had different experiences because I worked at a state agency, which was, you have to be small and scrappy because you have, like I said, no budget, no money, you're on your own, you're an island. So you are relying on the people who are publishing their resources online, and hoping for the best and just trying to experiment. And then after that, I went to a for-profit company who didn't really care about accessibility, but it was still something that I wanted to carry through. And then I didn't last long there because our ideals and our values just didn't match. So I petered along as long as I could to kind of make a living, and then find another job where I was eventually a contractor for working for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And again, that's a place where it really matters. And it was still a facet of my job, where again, I'm translating for people, where bringing developers together with communicators and front end people who are creating social media posts, and then social media became a thing, and people are trying to understand, like, well, how do I make these social media posts accessible, whether it's video or posting pictures? And again, the same tenets held true on social media that held true online. So then it's again translating this information, and then we were making a whole lot of PDFs, so I became fluent in tagging PDFs and understanding that, which again had the same tenets of accessibility that we had on the web. So again, translating that information and communicating the foundational fundamentals to people about why it's important. We've got the same structures and the same hierarchical things that we have to communicate to people. So how do we, get these fundamentals of communication across? Why is it important to have this be flexible and give people agency to make their own decisions and navigate the way they want to with assistive technology? And we don't need to hold hands and create ableist decisions just because somebody has a disability. So again, providing this information to people, but just in a wider spectrum for the federal government. After that, then I got my first opportunity to then go to J.P. Morgan Chase, where it's finally part of my job. It was officially the only thing I got to do. And then I was embedded as a subject matter expert within a Scrum team. So day in and day out, I'm working with designers, developers, Scrum team managers, leaders, writers, everything, where we're fixing bugs, we're shipping product, we're, in a tight release deadline, and shipping to, and then worrying about like the bottom line at this point. And then it became a different language, and it wasn't necessarily about always about the greater good at that point, and it didn't matter about money. And then we're talking about more about WCAG as opposed to Section 508. So you kind of learn a bit of different language. And in between there, I had gotten certification, not from IAAP, but a certification called Professional Certification of Web Accessibility from the University of South Australia. So I know that's different from the vast majority of people in the United States. I found that really rewarding because for me, you join a cohort of colleagues, you do online courses, you read, and then at the end of the course, you're really understanding the users, you're understanding WCAG, and you have a project that you engage in with your cohorts that you have to turn in and you have to have graded at the end of the course. And you have a teacher and a professor, Scott Hollier, that was really wonderful and taught you the importance of the end user in all of this. So I found that really rewarding. And for me, it's the learning stuck with me a lot more deeply than in my learning style and how I like really dig into content. So I found that rewarding in my jump from working with government to really working with the for-profit sector and the banking world. And again, still being able to translate in the banking world the end user when we're still trying to churn out bugs and talk about the end user, but not lose that when we're focusing on the bottom line. And when I worked at J.P. Morgan Chase, I not only worked with Scrum teams, and I had, I think, 4 or 5 Scrum teams that I worked with there, but I also worked with the design system, kind of writing like, how does this component work? What are we expecting? What are the keystrokes that we're using? How is it expected to sound when we're talking about assistive technologies that are engaging with this, like a screen reader? How robust do we need to make this? Because I think a lot of us who have worked with design systems understand our intentions aren't always how the developers and designers will take these components and implement them and then use them in their designs. So we need to really make them more robust so people can't misuse them. So being really clear and setting clear expectations and boundaries when we're creating these design systems. After J.P. Morgan Chase, I had the opportunity to go to Microsoft. And from there, man, I worked with a boatload of different products at Microsoft. I started in a group called AI&R, which covered everything from the research organization to Bing and Maps, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget so many products that were in there. Something that is long since gone called Cortana, which was like their version of Siri, their chatbots, all kinds of things like there that really, again, expanded the breadth of applying accessibility to a lot of different things that I hadn't tried before. But once again, the fundamentals hold true. What is this thing? What are we doing? How are we communicating the fundamentals to people to give them agency to operate this in the way that holds true, that they can understand what they're trying to accomplish here and how they can navigate this independently. And within Microsoft, then I got another opportunity to move to a group within there that was even more broad than that, where I worked on everything from the Windows 10 and 11 operating system to like some of their like mobile devices, like Surface kind of mobile devices, and then Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive, and then kind of working with a colleague to sometimes support some of the Office experiences there. So it was really, really huge. And again, like all kinds of wild things that would come up that you get to talk about and support and think through, like, how are we building these to support like millions of people worldwide, to make them really accessible and empowering for people. It really, when I think through it, this little girl from Oklahoma, that like, it blows my mind to think through the things, the products I've supported, the people I've worked with, the opportunities that I've had to like make an impact on something that is so meaningful to me, and that I hope is just creating more opportunities for other people in the world to create their own impact once they have tools that work for them.
Well, it's great to hear about your progression of experiences. I think it's helpful for people to, hear about the challenges and the opportunities. And in your case, it really does seem like there was a nice series of building blocks that kept moving you forward, bringing you to where you are today. And I think that, a lot of people first get into accessibility, it's a little bit hard seeing how you can become part of the profession, and then also hearing about your professional certification. I think that would be interesting to people as well.
Yeah.
And just looking kind of back at your career up through now and into the future, are there any areas that you've seen that you feel like there's been really interesting, amazing developments, or on the other side, are there some things where you think our profession is still, there are areas we need to pay more attention to or get more support for?
I think some of the most interesting developments are how much more open we are to including more and more people. The door, when I first got in, it seemed like it was a field of experts, and I never thought that I would be an expert. I never thought that I would be good enough to be in this. But I think one thing that has excited me is how more open it has become to all kinds of expertise in the field, and more welcoming it has become, because I do think we need all of those creative solutions in the space. We need more people in the pool, if you will, to really solve all of these complex things coming at us. Because a lot of times, some of the most creative solutions that we get are from new people coming into the field, and not us old fogies, where we've seen this same problem a bazillion times and we're thinking about it the same way we've always thought about it. It's new people working with us, or it's new people that often don't know the rules, don't know the way they have to think about it, that help us, that ask us a question, that make us think about it in a new way, or come at it completely out of the blue to come with a creative solution. And so that for me is one of the most exciting things, where it's no longer this like narrow field of like, sometimes it was experts trying to out expert one another online. It's just a breath of fresh air to me, whether it's like a younger generation or just cohorts that are really excited about making a change in this. And for me, that's part of the thing, that even with the people being scared about ChatGPT or AI that's coming into the tech industry right now, those are things, the ingenuity and the creativity of human expression and community, that cannot be replicated by AI right now.
Well, kind of looking forward, are there any things that you're particularly passionate or excited about, either coming up in your organization or things that you see, generally happening in the accessibility profession?
I really am passionate about accessibility of charts and graphs. I know that sounds really wonky, but there's so much data out there. And I really think whether you're talking about learning disabilities or disabilities where we're using things like screen readers or like Dragon Naturally Speaking or anything like that, making such large amounts of data accessible, and even like if I'm coming to new sets of data where I don't understand what you're trying to communicate to me with these large data sets and these really complex numbers, how do we make this data more accessible? People are using data to misrepresent things in large ways. And so how do we give people more better ways to communicate and use this data in clearer ways, and not in a way that's like, here's this graph, now go look at this table and parse this data. You've got dysgraphia, you've got dyslexia, you're using a screen reader, go read this table. Or you're new to this, go read this table, or try to understand what all of these acronyms are. And I think that is one of the biggest things on the frontier that we need to tackle, and that is the most exciting. And I see a lot of people researching and trying fun things, from sonification to all kinds of different ideas that can be, some of it can be prediction and could use some AI in promising ways, but can use creativity of the human spirit and community in other ways that will be really promising.
That's definitely a topic area that I think deserves a lot of attention, and it's what I'm interested in as well. It's been a great pleasure to be able to chat with you specifically for this program. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that, and hopefully we can get together again in the real world sometime soon.
I hope so too, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.